Over 3 decades ago, policymakers felt like they could deregulate the utility market. And there had been some success seen in the deregulation of airlines and in the deregulation of telecom companies. That was modeled after what is now our utility market. But instead of having now vertically integrated companies, we have a distribution network, we have generation companies, and we have a generation network that's responsible for seeing that the grid is in constant balance. So the energy consumed is matched with the energy generated. And so the hope was that in deregulating, we were going to increase competition, or the policymakers who passed this would get increased competition in the market and therefore lower prices. It did not work out that way at all.
What about my 80-year-old neighbor who's on a fixed income, whose medication costs are volatile, who is crippled by grocery costs right now, who have gone right up? How is she supposed to gather up if you can't, amongst your shareholders, bolster what you need for this when it's your income on the line? How are we going to possibly expect our constituents to be able to do the same?
It's also complicated because the cost of energy generation right now is really high, and that's related to the cost of natural gas that's been impacted by a war between Russia and the Ukraine. That is not something I, as a Connecticut legislator, can regulate.
I think a lot of ratepayers and customers and our constituents and consumers have a sort of opaque understanding of what is contributing to their bills.
And so there are these natural monopolies that are responsible for small segments that we are exceptionally reliant on for our energy to be distributed across the state of Connecticut. And they are regulated by PURA, but the only time PURA has to put regulations over these utility companies is in rate proceedings. And some of these companies haven't been before PURA in a long time, and PURA hasn't had the opportunity to demand that they come in. And that lack of ability for PURA to have this transparent oversight and review of their bills is something that SB 7 hopes to address.
And I think this bill makes an earnest attempt to wrap our arms around the parts of things that are passed on to ratepayers that we as legislators can address.
Specifically from my seat as the chief regulator in the state, I strongly believe that the adoption of this legislation will increase transparency into the costs that ratepayers are currently tasked with bearing. It will also provide additional accountability. In some ways, it will build on measures that you put into the Take Back Our Grid Act, some of which we've had the opportunity to begin employing. Others have not yet been before me.
We have a problem where our constituents feel like they are being pushed forward to continue to pay higher and higher rates, and they have no ability to intervene or intercede, and they're paying for your proceedings before them when that ask is made to increase. And maybe I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty certain you're not ever asking to lower our rates.
We've certainly done everything that we can in the early stages of our dockets to lower barriers so that folks don't have to be represented by attorneys, don't have to be deep in the weeds in order to provide meaningful feedback. This provision, which would expand it to all public service companies that come before us, would make clear that the costs associated with asking for more money should be borne by their shareholders and not ratepayers.
And that's my takeaway from this testimony right now, is there was a way to be more fiscally prudent that you would choose, and maybe you wouldn't like the outcomes as much, but if depending on who's footing the bill, you might choose to staff it differently. And so that raises concerns for me.